In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and streets buzzed with endless activity, lived a woman named Clara. She was an ordinary woman in many ways, yet there was something about her that made her stand out, if only people took the time to notice. Clara had soft brown eyes that sparkled when she smiled, though she rarely did so in public. Her hair fell just below her shoulders, often tied back in a simple ponytail. She dressed plainly, preferring comfort over style, and carried herself with quiet confidence. To those who didn't know her well, she seemed like any other face in the crowd. Clara's life might have appeared unremarkable at first glance, but beneath the surface lay a deep sense of contentment. For years, she had chosen to live simply despite being married to one of the most influential men in the business world. Ethan, her husband, was a self-made billionaire and the CEO of a global tech empire. His name graced magazine covers, and his presence commanded respect wherever he went. Yet Clara preferred to stay far away from the spotlight. While Ethan attended high-profile conferences, rubbed shoulders with celebrities, and flew around the world for meetings, Clara found joy in smaller things, tending to her tiny garden on their apartment balcony, painting landscapes during quiet afternoons, or volunteering at a local shelter every weekend. These were the moments that filled her days with meaning. Their home was modest compared to what most people imagined a billionaire's residence would look like. Instead of a sprawling mansion in the suburbs, they lived in a cozy two-bedroom apartment downtown. The walls were adorned with Clara's artwork rather than expensive paintings, and the furniture was practical rather than luxurious. Friends and acquaintances often teased Ethan about his simple lifestyle, but he always shrugged it off, saying he valued peace and happiness over material possessions. And truthfully, Clara's calm demeanor balanced his hectic schedule perfectly. They were a team, even if their lives seemed worlds apart. Despite her peaceful existence, Clara sometimes felt a nagging longing inside her, a desire to carve out her own identity beyond being Ethan's wife. Though she loved supporting him and admired his achievements, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't contributing enough to the world. Volunteering brought her fulfillment, but lately, it hadn't been enough. She wanted more, a purpose that belonged entirely to her. This thought lingered in her mind for weeks until one morning, while sipping coffee by the window, she decided it was time to take action. Clara began browsing job listings online, scrolling through pages of opportunities that caught her eye. At first, she hesitated, wondering whether anyone would take her seriously. After all, she hadn't worked a traditional 9-to-5 job in years, and her resume reflected gaps filled with hobbies and volunteer work. But then again, she reminded herself, everyone starts somewhere. Finally, she came across an opening for an administrative assistant position at a mid-sized marketing firm. The description sounded straightforward. Organizing schedules, managing emails, handling paperwork, the kind of tasks she excelled at without breaking a sweat. It wasn't glamorous, but it was exactly what she needed to dip her toes back into. Professional waters. With newfound determination, Clara updated her resume and submitted her application. Days passed before she received an email inviting her for an interview. Her heart raced as she read the message. Part of her felt excited, while another part worried about how others might perceive her. Would they see her as someone genuinely interested in working, or would they assume she was merely bored? Pushing these doubts aside, she prepared diligently, rehearsing answers to potential questions and picking out clothes that struck the right balance between professional and approachable. On the day of the interview, Clara arrived at the office building 15 minutes early. She stepped inside, clutching her folder tightly, and approached the receptionist to announce her arrival. The lobby was sleek and modern, with glass walls and polished floors reflecting the sunlight streaming through the windows. As she waited, she observed employees bustling about, some chatting animatedly, others typing furiously on laptops. Despite the nerves fluttering in her stomach, Clara felt hopeful. This could be the start of something new, a chance to prove to herself that she was capable of more than she gave herself credit for. When the hiring manager, Mr. Collins, finally called her name, Clara stood up, smoothing her blouse as she followed him to a small meeting room. From the moment he shook her hand, his demeanor set her on edge. His grip was firm but dismissive, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. Once seated, he glanced briefly at her resume before leaning back in his chair, studying her with an unreadable expression. "So," he began, his tone laced with skepticism, "you're applying for an admin role?" Clara nodded, explaining how her organizational skills and attention to detail made her a strong candidate. But instead of listening attentively, Mr. Collins interrupted her, asking pointed questions that bordered on rude. He questioned why someone like her, a woman who clearly didn't struggle financially, would bother applying for such a position. When Clara explained her passion for staying productive and contributing to meaningful work, he chuckled condescendingly. "You know," he said, tapping his pen against the desk, "most people apply here because they actually need jobs. Not because they're looking for, what did you call it, fulfillment?" His words stung, but Clara forced herself to maintain composure. She knew better than to let his attitude rattle her, at least not outwardly. As the interview dragged on, Mr. Collins grew increasingly hostile. He criticized her lack of recent corporate experience, mocked her casual attire, and even suggested she might be wasting everyone's time. By the end of the session, Clara's cheeks burned with embarrassment, and her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her belongings. She thanked him curtly and left the room, blinking back tears as she hurried toward the exit. Outside, the crisp autumn air hit her face, offering little relief from the storm brewing within her. How could someone judge her so harshly based on assumptions? All she had wanted was a fair chance, a chance to show that she was more than just a wealthy man's wife. What Clara didn't realize at that moment was that this humiliating encounter would become a turning point, not just for her, but for everyone involved. Little did she know, the ripple effects of Mr. Collins' behavior were already beginning to spread, setting off a chain of events that would change her life forever. Clara walked briskly down the busy streets of New York, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The sharp sting of Mr. Collins' words replayed in her head over and over again, each memory like a fresh wound. She felt angry, not just at him, but at herself for letting his words get under her skin. She had always prided herself on being strong, on staying composed no matter what life threw at her. But today, she couldn't shake the humiliation. It wasn't just the way he had spoken to her. It was the way he had dismissed her as though her dreams and ambitions were meaningless. Clara clenched her fists tightly, trying to push those thoughts away. By the time she reached the subway station, her steps slowed. The noise of the city faded into the background as she stood there, staring blankly at the train tracks. For a moment, she wondered if she should have said something back, something sharp or clever that would have put Mr. Collins in his place, but then she shook her head. No, that wasn't who she was. She didn't believe in stooping to someone else's level, even when they treated her poorly. Still, she couldn't deny that the experience left her feeling small and insignificant, like all her efforts were invisible. When Clara finally arrived home, Ethan wasn't there. He was away on yet another business trip, which wasn't unusual. Their schedules often didn't align, but Clara preferred it that way. She liked having time to herself to think and recharge without distractions. Today, however, she wished he were around, not because she needed him to fix things, that wasn't her style, but because she wanted to share what had happened. Talking about it might help her process the raw emotions swirling inside her. She sank onto the couch, setting her bag down beside her. Her gaze drifted to the painting on the wall, a colorful landscape she had created months ago. It was one of her favorites, a reminder of happier times when she felt free and inspired. Right now, though, it seemed distant, almost mocking in its brightness. Clara sighed deeply, leaning back against the cushions. As much as she tried to convince herself that the interview didn't matter, that she shouldn't let one bad experience define her, she couldn't ignore the ache in her chest. The next morning, Clara woke up determined not to dwell on the previous day's events. She brewed a cup of tea, opened the window to let in some fresh air, and sat by the balcony, watching the city come alive below. Despite her resolve, fragments of the interview kept creeping into her thoughts. Why had Mr. Collins been so rude? Was it really because of how she dressed? Or was it something deeper? something rooted in prejudice. She frowned, realizing that perhaps it wasn't just about her appearance or lack of recent work experience. Maybe it was about the assumptions people made when they saw her wedding ring, a symbol of stability and privilege in their eyes. Her phone buzzed on the table, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Ethan. "Hey, love. How's everything going? I'll be back tomorrow evening." Clara stared at the screen for a moment before typing a quick reply. "Everything's fine, safe travels." She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the send button. Should she tell him about the interview? About how she'd been humiliated by a stranger who knew nothing about her? She decided against it. Ethan had enough on his plate already, and she didn't want to burden him with her problems. Besides, she told herself, this was something she could handle on her own. Later that afternoon, Clara decided to visit the local shelter where she volunteered regularly. Being around animals always helped calm her nerves. The shelter staff greeted her warmly, and soon she was surrounded by wagging tails and eager barks. She spent hours playing with the dogs, feeding them treats and cleaning their kennels. For a while, she forgot about Mr. Collins and the weight of his harsh words. Here, among creatures who asked for nothing more than love and care, Clara found solace. But as the day wore on, reality began to creep back in. On her way home, she stopped at a small cafe to grab a coffee. Sitting by the window, she watched people pass by, each absorbed in their own world. Some looked happy, others stressed, but none of them seemed to notice her sitting there. Clara realized that in many ways, she had become invisible, not just to Mr. Collins, but to the world at large. And while part of her cherished the anonymity, another part longed to be seen, truly seen, for who she was. That evening, Clara picked up her sketchbook and began drawing absent-mindedly. At first, the lines were jagged and uneven, reflecting her inner turmoil. But as she continued, her strokes grew smoother, more deliberate. Slowly, an image emerged. A woman standing tall amidst a storm, her face calm despite the chaos around her. Clara smiled faintly as she added the finishing touches. Maybe, she thought, this was a sign, a reminder that storms eventually passed, and that strength came not from avoiding challenges but from facing them head-on. Unbeknownst to Clara, Ethan had already heard whispers of what had happened during her interview. News traveled fast in the corporate world, especially when it involved someone connected to a powerful figure like Ethan. One of his colleagues had casually mentioned overhearing gossip about a CEO's wife being mistreated during a job interview. At first, Ethan brushed it off, assuming it was just idle chatter. But as more details surfaced, including the name of the company and the hiring manager's behavior, he grew increasingly concerned. When Ethan called Clara later that night, his voice was unusually serious. "Hey," he said gently, "is everything okay? You've been quiet lately?" Clara hesitated, caught off guard by his tone. She debated brushing it off with a simple "I'm fine," but something in his voice made her pause. After a moment, she sighed and told him the truth. She recounted the entire incident, from the condescending remarks to the outright mockery she endured. To her surprise, Ethan listened silently, his breathing steady on the other end of the line. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then Ethan spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Clara, you don't deserve to be treated like that. No one does." His words brought tears to her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. She appreciated his concern, but she also felt a pang of frustration. She didn't want him to see her as weak or in need of protection. "I know," she replied softly. "But it's done now, I'll move past it." Ethan, however, wasn't ready to let it go. Over the next few hours, he made several discreet phone calls, gathering information about the marketing firm and its connection to his conglomerate. What he discovered shocked even him. The company where Clara had interviewed was one of many, subsidiaries indirectly funded by his investments. This revelation angered him, not because of the financial ties, but because it meant the hiring manager's behavior reflected poorly on his organization. If word got out, it could damage his reputation and the trust he had built with employees and stakeholders alike. Determined to address the situation, Ethan contacted the CEO of the marketing firm early the following morning. The conversation was brief but impactful. By noon, executives within the company were scrambling to contain the fallout. Rumors spread like wildfire among employees, and soon everyone knew about the disastrous interview involving Clara and Mr. Collins. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially Mr. Collins himself, who suddenly found himself summoned to an emergency meeting with senior management. For Clara, the day started like any other. She woke up, watered her plants, and spent some time sketching. She had no idea that behind closed doors, her husband was orchestrating a response to the injustice she had faced. Nor did she realize that the very man who had mocked her was now fighting to save his career. All Clara knew was that she was ready to turn the page, to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on the past. Little did she know, fate had other plans in store, for her and for Mr. Collins. The morning light filtered through the curtains of Clara's apartment, casting soft golden beams across the wooden floor. She woke up feeling lighter than she had in days, as though the weight of the previous week was finally beginning to lift. After spending hours sketching and reflecting, she decided it was time to take control of her emotions. Instead of letting the memory of Mr. Collins's rudeness haunt her, she chose to channel her energy into something positive. She brewed a fresh pot of coffee, grabbed her notebook, and sat by the window, jotting down ideas that had been swirling in her mind. Clara had always believed in turning challenges into opportunities. This wasn't just a mantra she repeated to herself, it was a way of life. As she scribbled notes about workplace fairness, respect, and empowerment, an idea began to take shape. What if she created a platform where people who faced discrimination or mistreatment at work could share their stories? A place where they could find support, advice, and even new job opportunities? The thought excited her. It felt like the perfect way to transform her own painful experience into something meaningful for others. While Clara brainstormed, chaos erupted miles away within the marketing firm where she had interviewed. Mr. Collins arrived at the office that same morning, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. He walked in with his usual air of arrogance, nodding curtly at colleagues and heading straight to his desk. His phone buzzed incessantly with emails and messages, but he ignored them, assuming they were routine updates. Within minutes, however, he was summoned to an urgent meeting with senior management, a request that sent a ripple of unease through him. When Mr. Collins entered the conference room, the atmosphere was tense. The executives sat around the table, their faces stern and unreadable. Papers were spread out before them, including screenshots of social media posts and internal reports detailing recent complaints against his behavior. Before he could utter a word, the CEO spoke in a low, commanding voice. "Mr. Collins," he began, "we've received credible information regarding your conduct during a recent interview. Specifically, your treatment of a candidate named Clara." At first, Mr. Collins tried to brush it off, insisting it was a misunderstanding. "I may have been direct," he said defensively, "but I assure you my intentions were professional." However, his excuses fell flat when the CEO slid a document across the table. It contained transcripts of Clara's account of the incident, corroborated by witnesses who overheard his comments. Worse still, there were financial records showing the company's indirect ties to Ethan's conglomerate, ties that made Mr. Collins's actions not only unethical, but potentially damaging to the firm's reputation. Realization dawned on Mr. Collins as he stared at the evidence. His face turned pale, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. For the first time in years, he found himself speechless. The CEO continued, his tone icy. "Your behavior is unacceptable. Not only have you disrespected a qualified candidate, but you've also jeopardized our relationship with one of our largest stakeholders. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties here." As Mr. Collins left the building later that day, his head hung low. Gone was the confidence that once defined him. Instead, shame and regret consumed him. He couldn't believe how quickly everything had unraveled. In the span of a single morning, he had gone from being a respected hiring manager to a disgraced employee with no future in the industry. News of his dismissal spread rapidly among co-workers, many of whom whispered behind closed doors about karma catching up to him. Some felt vindicated while others simply pitied him. Either way, Mr. Collins became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of arrogance and prejudice. Back at home, Clara remained oblivious to the drama unfolding at the marketing firm. Her focus was entirely on her project. She spent hours researching similar initiatives online, reaching out to friends for feedback and drafting plans for what she envisioned as a safe space for marginalized voices. By evening, she had sketched out a rough blueprint for her platform, a website where users could anonymously submit their experiences, connect with mentors, and access resources to help them navigate difficult situations. She called it Rise Together, a name inspired by her belief in collective strength and resilience. Ethan returned home late that night, his expression unreadable. He greeted Clara warmly, asking how her day had been. Clara smiled, sharing her excitement about the project she was working on. "It's still in the early stages," she admitted, "but I think it could make a real difference." Ethan listened intently, nodding as she explained her vision. When she finished, he reached out and took her hand. "Clara," he said softly, "you amaze me every day. You didn't let what happened break you. You're using it to build something incredible." His words touched her deeply, but Clara shrugged modestly. "I'm just trying to focus on what matters," she replied. "Besides, I don't want anyone else to feel the way I did that day. If this helps even one person, it'll be worth it." What Clara didn't know was that Ethan had already taken steps to ensure justice was served. Earlier that afternoon, he had contacted the marketing firm's legal team, offering to assist in rewriting their policies to prevent future incidents of discrimination. Additionally, he suggested incorporating Clara's story, albeit anonymously, into their training modules to educate employees about the importance of treating candidates with dignity and respect. The firm agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to rebuild trust and demonstrate accountability. Days turned into weeks, and Clara poured all her energy into bringing Rise Together to life. She enlisted the help of a freelance web developer to design the site, collaborated with volunteers to curate content, and reached out to organizations specializing in workplace advocacy. Each step brought her closer to her goal, and with every milestone achieved, her confidence grew. Friends and acquaintances noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed more radiant, more purposeful, as though she had rediscovered a part of herself she hadn't realized was missing. Meanwhile, news of Mr. Collins's firing leaked to the public, sparking conversations about workplace ethics and accountability. Journalists wrote articles dissecting the incident, highlighting the dangers of bias and elitism in corporate settings. Social media buzzed with debates, some defending Clara's right to pursue employment regardless of her marital status, while others condemned Mr. Collins's behavior as emblematic of systemic issues plaguing the workforce. Amidst the uproar, the marketing firm issued a formal apology, acknowledging their failure to uphold standards of professionalism and promising sweeping reforms. One evening, as Clara scrolled through her phone, she stumbled upon a news article mentioning the apology. At first, she felt conflicted. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as irrelevant. After all, she had moved on from the incident. But another part recognized its significance. By speaking up and refusing to let the experience define her, she had inadvertently sparked a larger conversation about fairness and equality. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel proud, not because of what had happened to her, but because of how she had responded to it. As autumn gave way to winter, Clara's platform gained traction faster than she ever imagined. People from diverse backgrounds began sharing their stories, finding solace in knowing they weren't alone. Volunteers joined forces to moderate discussions, offer guidance, and organize virtual events. Companies reached out, eager to partner with Rise Together to improve their hiring practices and foster inclusive environments. What started as a personal mission soon blossomed into a movement, touching lives far beyond Clara's expectations. Through it all, Clara remained humble, deflecting praise and focusing on the bigger picture. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. And though she never sought recognition, her quiet determination inspired countless others to rise above adversity. and embrace their true potential. Little did she know her journey was only beginning, and the impact she would leave on the world was just starting to unfold. Winter settled over New York City, blanketing the streets with a thin layer of snow that shimmered under the pale sunlight. Clara sat by her laptop, sipping hot cocoa as she scrolled through the growing number of stories posted on Rise Together. Each submission was unique yet carried a familiar thread of struggle, people recounting moments of being underestimated, dismissed, or mistreated because of their gender, race, age, or background. Some shared tales of resilience, while others expressed raw pain and frustration. Reading these accounts filled Clara with a mix of emotions: sadness for the hardships people endured, but also hope for the courage they showed in speaking out. The platform had grown faster than Clara ever anticipated. What started as a small idea scribbled in her notebook now attracted thousands of visitors daily. Volunteers from across the country joined her cause, offering skills ranging from graphic design to legal advice. A team of moderators worked tirelessly to ensure every story was heard and respected. Donations poured in from supporters who believed in Clara's mission, enabling her to expand the site's features and reach even more people. Despite the overwhelming response, Clara stayed grounded, reminding herself that the true measure of success wasn't fame or numbers. It was making a difference in people's lives. One evening, as Clara reviewed feedback from users, she came across a message that stopped her in her tracks. It was from a young woman named Maria, who described how Rise Together had changed her perspective after years of feeling trapped in toxic work environments. "For so long I thought I was alone," Maria wrote. "But reading other people's stories made me realize we're stronger together. Thank you for giving us a voice." Clara read the words over and over, tears welling up in her eyes. This was why she had started the platform, not for recognition, but to create a space where voices like Maria's could be heard. Ethan watched his wife's transformation with quiet admiration. He noticed how her confidence grew with each passing day, how her eyes sparkled when she talked about the impact of her work. Though he had always known Clara was extraordinary, seeing her step into this new role inspired him in ways he hadn't expected. One night as they sat together on the couch, Ethan turned to her and said, "You've built something truly remarkable, Clara. I'm so proud of you." She smiled softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without your support," she replied. But deep down, she knew this accomplishment belonged entirely to her, a testament to her strength and determination. While Clara thrived, Mr. Collins struggled to pick up the pieces of his shattered career. After losing his job, he found himself ostracized by former colleagues and blacklisted within the industry. His attempts to secure new employment were met with rejection after rejection, leaving him bitter and disillusioned. At first, he blamed everyone else, the company, the executives, even Clara, for his downfall. But as weeks turned into months, he began to reflect on his actions. Late at night, alone in his dimly lit apartment, he replayed the interview in his mind, cringing at the memory of his condescending tone and dismissive remarks. Slowly, guilt crept in. For the first time, Mr. Collins allowed himself to see things from Clara's perspective. He imagined what it must have felt like to walk into an interview room, only to be judged not for her abilities but for assumptions about her wealth and marital status. The realization hit him hard. He had been wrong, not just in how he treated Clara, but in the way he viewed people in general. Determined to make amends, he reached out to the marketing firm's HR department, requesting permission to issue a public apology. To his surprise, they agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to demonstrate accountability and growth. The apology appeared in a local newspaper a few days later. In it, Mr. Collins admitted his mistakes, acknowledging the harm he had caused and pledging to educate himself on workplace fairness and inclusivity. While some dismissed his statement as insincere, others saw it as a step in the right direction. Among them was Clara, who read the article with mixed feelings. Part of her doubted whether his remorse was genuine, but another part hoped it marked the beginning of real change, not just for him, but for others like him. As January rolled into February, Rise Together continued to gain momentum. Clara organized virtual events featuring guest speakers who shared insights on overcoming adversity in the workplace. She collaborated with advocacy groups to host workshops on building inclusive cultures and addressing systemic biases. Her efforts caught the attention of journalists, and soon interviews with Clara began appearing in magazines and online publications. Each feature highlighted her journey, from the humiliating interview to the creation of a platform that empowered thousands, and celebrated her unwavering commitment to justice and equality. Despite the growing attention, Clara remained focused on her mission. She refused sponsorships or partnerships that didn't align with her values, ensuring Rise Together stayed true to its purpose. When friends suggested she write a book or launch a podcast, she politely declined, explaining that her priority was supporting others rather than building a personal brand. This selflessness endeared her to the community she served, solidifying her reputation as a leader driven by compassion and integrity. One afternoon, as Clara prepared for an upcoming event, she received an unexpected email. It was from a representative of a prestigious organization dedicated to promoting workplace equity. They invited her to speak at their annual conference, describing her work as revolutionary and transformative. Clara stared at the screen, stunned. Speaking at such a high-profile event would mean stepping onto a global stage, a prospect both thrilling and daunting. After consulting with Ethan and her team, she accepted the invitation, viewing it as an opportunity to amplify the voices of those who trusted her with their stories. The weeks leading up to the conference were a whirlwind of preparation. Clara spent hours crafting her speech, weaving personal anecdotes with lessons learned from the experiences shared on Rise Together. She practiced tirelessly, rehearsing in front of Ethan and close friends until her delivery felt natural and heartfelt. On the day of the event, nerves bubbled inside her as she stood backstage, listening to the hum of anticipation from the audience. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself why she was there, to honor the courage of those who had entrusted her with their truths. When Clara stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, she exuded calm confidence as she greeted the crowd. Her voice steady, she began by recounting the incident that had sparked her journey, the interview that left her humiliated but ultimately led to the creation of Rise Together. She spoke candidly about the challenges she faced along the way, the doubts that lingered and the moments of triumph that kept her going. As she shared stories submitted by users, the audience listened intently, moved by the resilience and strength reflected in each account. By the end of her speech, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, cheering not just for Clara but for the movement she represented. Journalists rushed to capture sound bites while attendees lined up to thank her personally. For many, her words served as a call to action, a reminder that change begins with empathy, understanding, and a willingness to listen. As Clara stepped off the stage, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was more than she had ever dreamed of achieving, yet it still felt like the beginning of something greater. Back home, Clara reflected on how far she had come. From the quiet woman mocked in an interview room to a beacon of hope for countless individuals, her journey had transformed not only her life, but the lives of others as well. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, she faced them with renewed determination. After all, she had discovered a truth that would guide her forever. True strength lies not in titles or wealth, but in the ability to rise above adversity and inspire others to do the same. The weeks following Clara's speech at the conference felt like a whirlwind. Her story, along with the mission of Rise Together, captured the attention of people across the globe. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags inspired by her message, and news outlets featured interviews where she spoke passionately about creating safe spaces for marginalized voices. Despite the growing spotlight, Clara remained steadfast in her purpose. She didn't seek fame or recognition. What mattered most to her was ensuring that every person who visited Rise Together felt seen, heard, and valued. As the platform gained international traction, Clara began receiving messages from individuals in far-flung corners of the world. A teacher in India shared how she had been unfairly passed over for promotions because of her gender, while a factory worker in Brazil recounted being ridiculed for speaking out against unsafe working conditions. Each story reinforced Clara's belief that discrimination wasn't confined to one place or industry. It was a universal issue that demanded collective action. Determined to expand the platform's reach, she collaborated with translators and volunteers to make Rise Together accessible in multiple languages. The effort paid off as users from diverse backgrounds joined the community, sharing their experiences and finding solidarity. Ethan watched proudly as his wife navigated this new chapter of her life. He admired her ability to balance humility with ambition, always prioritizing the needs of others over personal gain. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Ethan turned to Clara and said, "You've created something bigger than yourself, Clara. Something that will keep growing long after we're gone." His words touched her deeply, but she shook her head slightly. "It's not about me," she replied softly. "It's about all of us. About building a world where no one has to feel invisible." Meanwhile, Mr. Collins struggled to rebuild his life. After issuing his public apology, he enrolled in workshops focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. At first, he approached these sessions reluctantly, feeling out of place among participants eager to learn. But as days turned into weeks, he found himself genuinely engaged, absorbing lessons about unconscious bias and systemic inequality. Slowly, his perspective shifted. He realized that his previous behavior stemmed not just from arrogance but from ignorance, a failure to recognize the humanity in others. Determined to prove he had changed, Mr. Collins reached out to local nonprofits, offering his time and skills to assist with job training programs for underprivileged communities. Though some organizations hesitated to accept his help, fearing it might be nothing more than an attempt at redemption, others welcomed him cautiously. Over time, his contributions earned their trust, and he became a mentor to young professionals, seeking guidance in navigating the corporate world. It wasn't easy. There were moments when doubt crept in, and he questioned whether he deserved a second chance. But he pushed forward, driven by a desire to make amends. Back in New York, Clara faced challenges of her own. As Rise Together grew, so did the demands on her time and energy. Managing the platform required constant attention, from addressing technical issues to moderating discussions and responding to user feedback. Some nights, she stayed up late troubleshooting problems or brainstorming ways to improve the site's functionality. Despite her exhaustion, she refused to let anything compromise the quality of support provided to users. Her dedication inspired those around her, including her team of volunteers who worked tirelessly alongside her. One day, while reviewing submissions, Clara came across a message from a man named James. His story stood out because it was so different from the others. James described how he had once held prejudiced views similar to Mr. Collins's, judging candidates based on superficial factors rather than their qualifications. However, after encountering Rise Together, he decided to confront his biases and educate himself. He wrote, "Your platform opened my eyes to the harm caused by assumptions. I'm learning to be better, not just for myself, but for everyone I interact with." Clara read the message several times, tears welling up in her eyes. Stories like James's reminded her why every step of this journey was worth it. In March, Clara received an invitation that took her by surprise. A prominent university asked her to deliver a keynote address during their annual leadership summit. The theme of the event was empathy in action, and the organizers believed Clara's work embodied the essence of the topic. Though honored, Clara hesitated initially, unsure if she could live up to such high expectations. With encouragement from Ethan and her team, she accepted the offer, viewing it as another opportunity to spread awareness about workplace fairness and inclusivity. Preparing for the keynote proved both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Clara poured her heart into crafting a speech that would resonate with students, educators, and industry leaders alike. She drew inspiration from the countless stories shared on Rise Together, weaving them into a narrative about the power of empathy and the importance of standing up for what is right. On the day of the event, as she stood backstage listening to the murmurs of anticipation from the audience, Clara reminded herself of the reason she was there: to inspire change, one person at a time. When Clara stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Dressed in a simple yet elegant dress, she exuded grace and confidence as she greeted the crowd. Her voice steady, she began by recounting her own journey, from the humiliation of the interview to the creation of a platform that empowered thousands. She spoke candidly about the challenges she faced, the doubts that lingered, and the moments of triumph that kept her going. As she shared stories submitted by users, the audience listened intently, moved by the resilience and strength reflected in each account. By the end of her speech, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, cheering not just for Clara, but for the movement she represented. Journalists rushed to capture sound bites while attendees lined up to thank her personally. For many, her words served as a call to action, a reminder that change begins with empathy, understanding, and a willingness to listen. As Clara stepped off the stage, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was more than she had ever dreamed of achieving, yet it still felt like the beginning of something greater. Clara returned home invigorated, ready to tackle the next phase of growth for Rise Together. She introduced new features to the platform, including a mentorship program connecting experienced professionals with those seeking career advice. She also partnered with schools and universities to educate students about workplace ethics and inclusivity, planting seeds of change for future generations. Every milestone brought fresh challenges, but Clara embraced them wholeheartedly, knowing they were steps toward a brighter, more equitable future. Unbeknownst to Clara, her impact extended beyond the digital realm. Companies began reaching out, asking for guidance on implementing inclusive hiring practices and fostering supportive workplace cultures. Some even invited her to lead workshops or serve as a consultant, though she declined lucrative offers that conflicted with her values. Instead, she focused on empowering others to take ownership of their roles in driving change. Her selflessness earned her widespread respect, solidifying her reputation as a leader driven by compassion and integrity. As spring arrived, painting the city with vibrant colors, Clara reflected on how far she had come. From the quiet woman mocked in an interview room to a beacon of hope for countless individuals, her journey had transformed not only her life, but the lives of others as well. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, she faced them with renewed determination. After all, she had discovered a truth that would guide her forever. True strength lies not in titles or wealth, but in the ability to rise above adversity and inspire others to do the same. As summer approached, Clara found herself reflecting on the incredible journey she had embarked upon. What started as a single moment of humiliation had blossomed into something far greater than she could have ever imagined. Rise Together was no longer just a website. It was a movement, a community, and a symbol of hope for people around the world. Every day brought new stories, new connections, and new opportunities to make a difference. Yet, despite the platform's success, Clara remained grounded, always remembering the core reason she had started it: to ensure that no one felt invisible or powerless in the face of injustice. One sunny morning, as Clara watered her plants on the balcony, Ethan walked over with a cup of coffee in hand. He handed it to her with a warm smile. "You've built something truly extraordinary," he said softly. Clara chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's not about me," she replied, sipping the coffee. "It's about everyone who shares their story, everyone who believes in this cause." Ethan nodded, knowing how deeply she meant those words. To Clara, the platform wasn't hers alone. It belonged to the countless individuals who trusted her with their truths. That afternoon, Clara received an email that caught her by surprise. It was from Mr. Collins. At first, she hesitated to open it, unsure of what to expect. But curiosity got the better of her, and she clicked on the message. In the email, Mr. Collins expressed his gratitude for the lessons he had learned through her work. He wrote about how reading the stories on Rise Together had opened his eyes to the harm caused by assumptions and prejudice. He admitted that he still had much to learn but promised to continue striving to be better. Clara read the email twice, her heart softening. While she couldn't forget the pain he had caused, she recognized the sincerity in his words. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about excusing someone's actions. It was about acknowledging growth and giving them a chance to change. The months ahead were filled with milestones for Clara and Rise Together. The platform celebrated its first anniversary with a virtual event attended by thousands of users from across the globe. Speakers included individuals whose lives had been transformed by the community, as well as advocates working tirelessly to promote workplace fairness. Clara delivered a heartfelt speech during the event, thanking everyone who had contributed to the platform's success. "This isn't my victory," she said, her voice steady, yet emotional. "It's ours, a testament to the power of standing together." Following the anniversary celebration, Clara decided to take a small step back from the day-to-day operations of the platform. She knew that for Rise Together to thrive long-term, it needed to evolve beyond her personal involvement. With the help of her team, she established a board of advisors composed of volunteers, experts, and passionate advocates. Together, they worked to refine the platform's mission and expand its reach even further. Clara transitioned into a mentorship role, guiding the next generation of leaders while continuing to share her vision with the world. Ethan noticed a subtle shift in Clara during this time. While she remained as dedicated as ever, she seemed lighter, freer. She spent more time painting, gardening, and volunteering at the shelter. Activities that had once been her refuge before Rise Together consumed most of her energy. One evening, as they strolled through Central Park, Ethan turned to her and asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if none of this had occurred? If you hadn't gone to that interview?" Clara paused, considering the question. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted. "But I believe everything happens for a reason. That experience shaped me in ways I never expected. It taught me resilience, empathy, and the importance of using my voice not just for myself but for others." Meanwhile, Mr. Collins continued his journey of redemption. His efforts to educate himself and contribute positively to society earned him cautious acceptance within certain circles. Though he would never fully erase the mistakes of his past, he had taken significant steps toward becoming a better person. He often thought about Clara and the impact she had made, not only on him, but on countless others. Her courage and grace inspired him to keep pushing forward even when the road felt uncertain. By autumn, Rise Together had become a household name, synonymous with empowerment and advocacy. Schools incorporated its resources into their curriculums, companies sought guidance from its leaders, and policymakers referenced its principles in discussions about systemic reform. Clara's story served as a reminder that change often begins with a single act of bravery, that standing up for oneself can inspire others to do the same. Journalists hailed her as a modern-day trailblazer, though Clara preferred to stay out of the limelight, focusing instead on nurturing the community. She had helped build. One crisp October morning, Clara received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, the envelope adorned with colorful stamps from Brazil. Curious, she opened it and began to read. The letter was from Maria, the young woman who had once thanked Clara for giving her a voice. Maria wrote about how Rise Together had changed her life, helping her secure a job where she felt valued and respected. She described how she now mentored other women in her community, encouraging them to pursue their dreams without fear. "Because of you," Maria wrote, "I've found my purpose. Thank you for showing me that we are stronger together." Clara held the letter close to her chest, tears streaming down her face. This was why she had done all of this. Not for recognition, but for moments like this. For every person who found strength, courage, or hope through her work. She shared the letter with Ethan that evening, her voice trembling with emotion as she read it aloud. "You've touched so many lives," Ethan said, wrapping his arms around her. "And you'll continue to do so in ways you may never even know." As winter returned, blanketing the city in snow, Clara looked back on the year with a sense of fulfillment. She had faced adversity, risen above it, and created something beautiful in its place. But more importantly, she had shown the world that true strength lies not in titles or wealth, but in character, compassion, and the willingness to stand up for what is right. Whether through art, advocacy, or simply lending an ear, Clara proved that everyone has the power to make a difference. And so, Clara's journey continued, not as a destination, but as a path paved with endless possibilities. Each step forward reminded her of the infinite potential within herself and others. Through laughter, tears, triumphs, and challenges, she embraced life with open arms, knowing that the best was yet to come.